Thursday, October 6, 2016. Maneco64 here, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I like to talk about the U.S. national debt, the budget deficit, and also later on I'll cover the U.K. numbers. Mainly because I watched a really interesting video yesterday on Greg Hunter, USA Watchdog, Catherine Austin Fitz interview. I've been reading Catherine Austin Fitz work for years and also listening to her. She was an insider. She worked on Wall Street for an investment bank in the 80s. Then she worked for the Bush first administration in HUD, Home and Urban Development. It's like a housing department, and she saw a lot of corruption there. She's been trying to expose it for the last 25, 30 years. All the theft that's ongoing in the U.S. government. And Catherine Austin Fitz has been of the view that the system is going to keep going, like a slow burn of the system, basically more of the same. But in this latest interview on October 4th, she says, the title of the interview is "Chances of Slow Burn Continuing Radically Diminished." So she actually thinks that there's so much theft going on by the powers that be, by Washington, D.C., and that people are waking up and that they need to wake up. She talks about the $6.5 trillion that are unaccounted for from the Department of Defense. She says there's another 2.8 trillion, so it's like 9.3 trillion as of 2015 that wasn't accounted for. And she has a number of about 50 trillion that basically people, the government spent, and we don't know where that money's going. And she started keeping track of that back in 97, 98 because she knew, from working for the Bush administration that there were a lot of shenanigans going in all the different departments. And she says that Monica Lewinsky was a huge distraction. And I believe her, and she says that we can't let Monica Lewinsky too, which is basically, I guess, the elections, distract us from the fact that money, Uncle Sam is basically stealing trillions from the American public and future generations, I would say. So with that in mind, I had a look into more of about the budget and the national debt. And I found an article by from October 1st from Wolf Richter, who has a website called wolfstreet.com. Some of my viewers have already told me about this website. It's a good website. It's about business and finance. And Wolf Richter, he asks, and that's the title of his article. He doesn't ask, this is the title, sorry. This is why U.S. government deficit numbers are a big lie. So basically, the other day, the U.S. government announced that the debt grew by 1.38 trillion for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2016. So huge increase. We're now at 9.5 trillion. But the more interesting thing that Wolf Richter looked at, and this is all numbers from the Office of Management and Budget in Congress. He looked at that in 2016, this latest fiscal year, the deficit was 590 billion. So how come the debt increased 1.38 trillion? Doesn't make sense, does it? And then he wanted to see what happened the year before. So the deficit for 2015 was 438 billion. So the total for the last 2 years has been 1,028 billion. So let's say 1 trillion. But the national debt these last 2 years has gone up 1.7 trillion. So basically what Wolf Richter is pointing out is that there's 700 billion off the budget, because if it was on the budget, the deficits would be 700 billion larger. But the thing is, the national debt has gone up by 700 billion more than the deficits. So that means the Treasury has borrowed that money, but no one knows where that money's gone, Uncle Sam. Where is it? So it's very interesting. And he's done the same exercise all the way from 2003 to present. And the accumulated deficits since that period have been $9.26 trillion. But the national debt has gone up by 3.3 trillion. So we've got 4.04 trillion not on the budget, off budget, but it has been borrowed. And he's asking the question, where's the money? And he's right. And he actually talks about the 6.5 trillion from the DOD. He says this 4 trillion is a completely different thing. He says the 9 trillion for the DOD is accounted for. It's money that's been accounted for by the Office of Management and Budget. Where it hasn't been accounted is at the Department of Justice. So it's just a huge mess. Where is the full faith and credit of the United States? Where are the auditors and the accountants? What are they doing? I don't know, but I think people are waking up to the fact that their wealth has been stolen by Uncle Sam, not only presently but for future generations, because it's all going to be taxes that people will need to pay. So Catherine Austin Fitz actually thinks that if you include the bailouts, it's the number is like 50 trillion, but I'm not really sure about that. But I wouldn't I wouldn't question her too much. I think she's right. And she thought that the slow burn could keep going, that they could keep people distracted enough and engineer kind of a bankruptcy over time, because they've basically stolen all that money and the public, the taxpayer can't afford it. But she thinks now that, and she says she can't predict, things, but she thinks over the next year or two, we could have like an uncontrolled, collapse of the system, because there's just too many lies and too much money missing. And it's interesting because I made a video yesterday about the pound, how I think it's an engineered collapse of the currency, because we've got so much liability, and so much debt. And I thought of going through a bit like Wolf Richter through the UK numbers, deficits and debt. And I have to say, in the UK, it's not as easy to find information. There's not as many people covering this subject, but I did find something actually from Parliament. It's a report from the 21st of September this year, 2016, and I'll put it on the screen now and I'll talk about it. So I basically looked here, public sector net borrowing, which is the budget deficit, since 2003 fiscal year, which in the UK ends in April, beginning of April, the fiscal year. Up until now, I've added up all those deficits, and they've added to 1,103 billion, which is 1.1 trillion. That has been the cumulative deficit of the UK budget since 2003. But the national debt has gone up from 356.2 billion in 2003 to 1.6 trillion now. So that's an increase of 1.246 trillion. So there's an extra, the UK government has basically borrowed an extra 142 billion, and that's off the budget. So where's that money gone, John Bull? So you might say 142 billion is not that much, Mario. But, our national debt is about 10 times less than the US. So if you add a zero to the 140, to that number, it's more like, 1 1.4 trillion pounds, which is, similar to, not similar, but up there with that 4 trillion US money missing. And the thing about the UK budget, the UK national debt, is that it does not include, it says here, borrowing and debt figures exclude public sector banks. Because when the UK banks collapsed in '08, RBS especially, the UK government had to take over their debt obligations. So we carry that in the books, the UK books, but they never put it with these numbers. It's like, oh, yeah, we took loads of debt from that, hundreds of billion, but we're not going to put it there. And we still owe, the UK taxpayer still owns about 70% of RBS. So very interesting, a lot more opaque and difficult to see the UK numbers. But so yeah, where is the money, Uncle Sam? And Catherine Austin Fitz, says that she has an article here, quite an interesting one. It says, Crazy Man versus Criminal. Crazy Man versus Criminal, Cut and Run, Monica Lewinsky 2, and Real Trouble Ahead. So she basically thinks that voting for Clinton is voting for a continuation of all this corruption and all this theft of trillions and trillions of dollars. She says she thinks Trump is a bit crazy, but she's actually now leaning towards voting for Trump only because she'd rather take the risk of having someone that's seems anti-establishment and knows how angry the American people are getting, than voting for someone that's going to continue the status quo. So that's what she says. Monica Lewinsky 2 basically means that we got so much distraction nowadays, a bit like they had in '98 with the Monica Lewinsky case, the impeachment of Bill Clinton, that no one looked, at the money, how it was been siphoned off. And she's warning people about that. And in the UK, I think they started the demolition already. It's a controlled one. With the British pound. And why do I say that? Well, because it's part of a bankruptcy proceeding to devalue, your debt. And governments can do that through because they control the currency. Will the U.S. Controlled demolition, or what Catherine Austin Fitz says, the slow burn? Are we going to get a controlled demolition, an uncontrolled one, or like a collapse? Or she doesn't think we're going to get a slow burn anymore. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. A bit of number crunching there. So if you enjoy my videos, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. And if you'd like to donate to my channel, there's some links below in the description. Take care. Bye.